Enough about us. We're here to talk about nursing. Whether or not you are a nurse is unimportant. One of our dear friends, the professor of psychiatry in Tokyo, Tsuyoshi Akayama, he translated our work into Japanese. He spoke with us at a conference one time, and he stood up and he said, I am not a nurse, but I care. My work is about caring also for people. So for us, we're talking about nursing, and we're going to use a definition that I fashioned probably in 1986, 1985 when I presented my doctoral thesis, so it's from over 30 years ago. I was disappointed when I was developing my thesis from 1979 to 85, that when I looked at the nursing literature, I read lots of stuff about nursing, but I couldn't find any common ground. I couldn't find anyone who said, this is a definition of nursing. It was easy to find a definition of medicine, medical practice. Very easy to find a definition of clinical psychology practice, and the various other therapies. But when you looked at nursing, there was all sorts of descriptions about what nurses did, but there was no clear definition of what was the purpose of this, what was the point of doing all these things, other than to earn a living. And so I tried to fashion a definition for my own, and because English is our second language as Scots, I went to the root. I went to find out, well, where did the word nursing come from? And of course, I discovered that, like a lot of English words, it had a Latin basis, but it also had an Old French root. Nursing comes from the Old French nourris, which means to nourish. And I thought, yeah, this makes sense. Nursing is about how do you provide nourishment for something. But why would you want to do that? What would be the purpose? To help the thing grow and develop. And I thought, that's what nursing is. Nursing is about providing the conditions which are necessary for the promotion of growth and development. And I met a scholar, a Greek scholar at the University of St Andrews, which is near to where we live in Fife. And I talked to him over a drink one night, and I told him the story, and he smiled, and I said, what would the Greek be for the provision of the necessary conditions for the promotion of growth and development? And he said, that's easy, it's trephotaxis, from traphoia and taxis. Taxis is the necessary structure from which you get things like taxonomy, and traphoia is about growth and development. And I did write a paper once, a little tongue-in-cheek, talking about trephotaxis, because in our field we often talk about very ordinary ideas, but have this kind of compulsion to develop complicated jargon to describe it. So all we're going to talk about today is about how do we promote growth and development. What are the conditions that might be necessary for the promotion of growth and development? Because we believe that that is our whole purpose. Whether we are called a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a psychiatric nurse, a social worker, we believe that what we are all intent on doing is helping people grow and develop. Why? So they can stand on their own feet, make their own decisions, and act within their own lives. That is what all of you who are parents do. Parents nurse their children. They care for them when they are vulnerable, but very quickly they try to get the child to stand literally on its own 2 feet. And then for the rest of their childhood, they provide the conditions under which the child can grow and develop and act within its own life, so that eventually the child will say, thank you very much, I'm off now, into the world on my own. I realized very quickly early in my career that nurses did not do this. Nurses controlled and contained the people in their care. And so many of the people I work with had been 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. I met a man early in my career who had been 57 years in the hospital. He had not been nursed. He had been captured by caring. The Tidal Model is a way of thinking. It is not a technology. We have a little bit of technology that we'll talk about later in the morning and in the afternoon. But it is principally a philosophy. I discovered early in my career that nurses didn't like philosophy. They liked things to be very black and white. They liked rules, they liked regulations, they liked procedures. They knew when things started and they knew when they finished. That's what they liked. We think that you have to know what is your purpose before you can act. And it's a way of thinking about how people might reclaim their personal story, take it back as a first step to recovering their lives. Because the first thing that will happen if you experience some kind of breakdown in your life and you become a psychiatric patient is that the story of who you are as a person will be pushed to one side, and the whole focus will be on your clinical presentation. A story, as Poppy said, that will be written by all the professionals, like her mother, her story about her, and which you will find difficult to see yourself in that story. If you are going to get back on your feet and go back into your life again, the first thing you have to do is to take back the story of who you are as a person and all the things which are important to you, which have brought you to this point. That's what we call reclamation. It's difficult to translate into French, but it means literally taking back ownership of the most valuable thing that you own. It's not your Gucci handbag, you know, it's not your Hermes watch. It's a story of who you are as a person. And it's about helping people describe their experience in their own words. In their own words, as a step towards learning how to live better with such experiences. Someone tells you, I just had experience X. And you say, tell me more about that. And they will tell you more about what that experience was like in their own language. And you will listen and ask them more questions about what that experience was like for them. And the more they try to explain to you what it is they experienced, the more they will understand it better. I learned very early on in my professional career that if you wanted to learn how to do something really well, the first thing you should try and do is try and teach someone else what it was you were trying to learn. Because in trying to communicate your understanding to someone else, you have to find words, expressions, which were not there originally. And so, again, everything in the Tidal Model is interactive. Someone asked us very early on in Australia, was there a self-help version of this? And we said no. Do you plan to have a self-help version? No. Why not? Because people would just go off to their room, their study, and they would write everything that they already know about themselves. Whereas, if you have to explain yourself to someone else, you will find bits of a story that you had either forgotten or that you'd never actually realized about yourself. So it becomes a creative, developmental, trefotaxic undertaking. And it's a theory of helping that's expressed in everyday language based on uncommon sense. What is uncommon sense? There is no French for uncommon sense. But someone once said to us at a conference or a presentation this is just common sense. It was probably a Scotsman. They're keen to bring everything down to a very basic level. And Poppy said, so this is common sense. Yes, yes. So that means that everybody does this. Oh, no, everybody doesn't do it. Oh, so everybody doesn't do this. Well, no, everybody doesn't do it. And so then, off the cuff, she said, well, maybe it's sense, but if everybody doesn't do it, it must be uncommon sense. And I think that's a very important idea, because a lot of things look like common sense because they're simply stated. But if everybody doesn't do it, they must be unusual. We started doing this way back in the 80s. Poppy was working with people with multiple disabilities. I was working with people with what we called severe psychiatric problems. She was a social worker. I was a psychiatric nurse. We both also had a sideline as therapists. We realized that we were working with two different groups of people, but we were both doing exactly the same thing. The distinctions between social worker and nurse were unimportant. The distinction between disability and mental illness were unimportant. We were both trying to do the same thing, help people grow and develop. And in the 90s, I developed this concept of a need for nursing, and most importantly, we brought into our team people who had had experience of being psychiatric patients, some of them many, many times over, some or who already were or who currently were in the psychiatric system. And we called them consumer consultants because we said what we were trying to do was akin to we're bringing out a new product for a supermarket, right? Well, the first thing you want to do is, well, ask the people who are going to consume this product, what do you think of it? As Jerome did this morning, he will show you the French translation and say, what do you think of it? And a lot of our consumer consultants said, this is too complicated, I don't understand that. You need to revise this, you need to revise that. And so it was a team approach, and gradually over a 2 or 3 year period, they helped us to bring something together which was to their satisfaction as consumers, that met their needs. And for us, that's the whole point. And by the way, you can get all these slides from Jerome at the end if you wish, but we published almost 20 years ago the first paper and did research evaluation 20 years ago. And the other important thing to say is that our ambition over 20 years ago when we developed that with our consumer consultant colleagues, developed that format, was for this to be a recovery-focused way of working. And recovery 20 years ago was not as popular as it is today. But now today, there are probably journals dedicated to recovery. And people, well, we have seen some books about recovery which we found very difficult to understand because it was riddled with all that kind of professional jargon. For us, recovery is very simple. It just simply means getting going again, right? You lose your balance and you fall over, or you fear you're going to fall over. What do you want to do? You want to recover your balance. You want to take it back. You fall down the stairs, you break your leg. You get it put in a cast. Then you get the cast taken off. Then you get some physiotherapy. All to what purpose? So that you can recover the function of your leg. So that you can get going again in your life. Doesn't mean to say you won't fall and break your leg again. Maybe umpteen times, right? And that's an important thing to remember. Recovery is not a once and for all thing that happens. It's something you do here and now. And hopefully you will think it will last. But as Poppy said, ebb and flow of the tides. Life is constantly changing. We'll say more about that later. But we believe reclamation is the first step in recovery. For the reasons that I gave to you earlier. That you have to take back ownership of who you are as a person if you are going to be able to move forward in your own life. Otherwise, you may, like a lot of the people I met for the first time, almost 50 years ago when I became a psychiatric nurse, you may become a person who, when you go to a conference, you walk up to someone and say, "Hi, my name's Phil, I'm a psychiatric patient." Or, "Hi, my name's Phil, I'm a bipolar." And we always say, "Nice to meet you, Phil. So tell me more about yourself." And eventually they will say, "I used to be a builder," or "I used to be a violinist." Right, tell me about that. So long you played the violin. We have no interest in what is wrong with people. Bipolar, schizophrenic, personality disorder may be very interesting. We want to know, who are they as persons? Because that's who they have been all of their life. Persons. Reclamation is about taking back ownership of your property. And some of us here may be unfortunate later in our lives that we may begin to dement. And what will happen when you dement, or you may have had members of your family or friends who have demented, is that you begin to lose your story. Right? And it doesn't matter what else, it doesn't really matter if you lose control of your bowels or bladder, and that can be, you can live with that, but if you lose your story, you've lost everything. That is the most valuable thing that you own. And recovery is just about regaining possession, use, or control of something, which is important. When people say to us, "I would like to recover," we say, "What is it you want to recover?" And they often have to stop and think, right? Because they've heard about recovery, and it seems like a good idea, but what is it they want to recover? Recover what? To what particular purpose? Right? So for us, recovery is just the beginning of what might be a very interesting conversation with the person. So you'll forgive us if we don't talk about patients or clients. In the UK, they're called service users. In America and Australia, they're called consumers. You know, as if they're just nipping round to the supermarket, you know, to buy some milk. For us, they're none of these things. They're people, first and foremost. They're persons with their own lives, you know, loved ones' hopes and dreams of their own, just like us. Now, this is not romantic. This is not like Braveheart. This is not to say that, you know, every one of the probably now thousands of people that we have met down our, you know, careers, which go back to the late 60s, early 70s. That doesn't mean that everybody we met we thought were wonderful people. Some of the people we met we didn't get on with for one reason or another. But we would like to think that we respected them as a person. And that is what our focus is. This is not a touchy-feely, goody-goody, you know, West Coast American, hey man, you know, right? This is just a down-to-earth, respectful beginnings of that relationship that Robert Flaherty talked about.
There's a lot of metaphor used in the Tidal Model. If you've read it, you'll know that. Some people like metaphor and other people hate it, especially academics. In the model, we say there's three ships. There's making relationships, building relationships, and sustaining relationships. One of the starting points for us is life cannot be controlled. We all try to control our life. Everybody in this room tries to control their life by the way they dress, what car they drive, where they live. But life can't be controlled. You never know what's going to happen next. You never know who's going to walk through that door. Life can change. Life cannot be controlled. So we believe we have to learn to swim, or we have to learn to build a boat. Keep us in balance. Change is constant. John Lennon said, do you know who John Lennon is? You all look too young. Change is constant. John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And for many people here, they'll know that's the truth. Phil and I certainly know that. This is a picture of us. We started off as art college students. This is us with our daughter. Well, we didn't get into the world of art till later on. We had all kinds of hopes and dreams. We were going to change the world. Other things happened to us. But then we wouldn't be here before you today if those things hadn't happened. So while we were making those plans, life took over. Everyone is as unique as their fingerprint. And this is something, I think, when we're working with people who are difficult, seen as difficult, day in, day out, it's sometimes hard to remember that everyone is as unique as their fingerprint or their story. Everybody in this room has their own story. And even if you grew up here and you went to the same school, you came from the same economic background, you were brought up in the same kind of family situation, it wouldn't matter. Your story would still be very unique. No person's story is the same. And that's what makes our work interesting. That's why we're passionate about the work. Because wherever we go, we hear stories. Have you ever sat on a train and somebody's come and sat beside you and started telling you their story? And isn't it interesting? So we think everyone is as unique as their story and their fingerprint.